Hi, everyone. It is good to see you. Welcome to Bible Study Live with Connie and friends. Right now, it's just with Connie. Friends will be coming. And tonight, I missed you last week. Sorry I couldn't be here. But tonight, we're going to be talking about a divine solution. And, I went back and forth on what I wanted to talk about tonight because there are so many things that are vexing my mind, that are giving me angst, things happening in the world. And honestly, when you read the things that are happening in the world and then you read the Bible, starting right from the beginning of Genesis and all that happened right from the beginning with deception and the serpent and then Cain and Abel, and then if you read through in the first book, there's just drama and trauma and mess. So it shouldn't therefore surprise me that there is drama and trauma and mess in um, in the real world. That shouldn't surprise me that there is drama and trauma and mess in the real world when it's been from the beginning, but it still does. And I'm always trying to figure it out. And I use the Bible often as a guide to help me understand because it's here to be a history book so that we don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past, although we do it constantly. But it's here to be a history book, a guidebook, and I believe a journal. I mean, we're looking at all of it. We're looking at accounts of things that when we read them, sometimes you read something and you wonder if the people involved, did they know that this person was scheming and doing this? But we're reading about it in a book. So somehow it became public knowledge because we're reading an account of it in a book. And find that really fascinating. Hi, sister. I'll bring you on in a minute, of course. So tonight we're talking about a divine solution because one of the things that I am always struck by, um, especially when you're reading the New Testament, which is the part with Jesus in it. So um, when you're reading the New Testament, what I see often is the way Jesus resolved an issue is not the way we would have thought to resolve it. He always had a different way of resolving it. And we saw a little bit of this in Solomon when Solomon prayed and asked for wisdom. And not in the book Song of Solomon. We saw it it's when his reign. So it's in, I think, 2 Samuel. But we saw in that where, there were two women and one had a baby that was stillborn and one did not. The one stole the baby that was alive, and they went to Solomon about it to say, she's got my child. No, it's my child. And his way of resolving it, in case you've never heard this story, his way of resolving it was, you know what? Just cut the baby down the middle and give each woman half. And of course, the actual mother of the child said, no, 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 no. Just let her keep it. Just let her keep really. And the other one was like, yeah, let's cut it in half because, she had a dead baby, so she felt like everybody else should too. So immediately Solomon knew that the baby belonged to the mother who would rather preserve the child's life than cut it in half and give each woman half. I don't know that I would have thought of that quickly on the spot, but it is here for an example for us to think out of the box and all of that, and that's great. This story that I'm reading tonight, I'm going to read it out of the Bible. So the book of John, chapter 8 and verses 1 through 11, but then I'm also going to read an account of it from this book called Daughters of Eve. And this has really, really interesting stories in it about all of the women in the Bible, their stories, and it's interesting how the author broke them down. So the areas, the chapters, or the subheads. Hi, Latrice. The subheads are mothers, women in marriage, women on the outside, single women, women in violence, which is where we're reading from tonight, sensual women, manipulative women, political women, business women, women, and the supernatural. So Like I said, this book is called Daughters of Eve. I don't know if you've read it before, but it's a really powerful book. So we're going to read the same story, but from that perspective, from this author, Virginia Stem Owens. But first, I'll read the scripture. So John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, reading out of NIV. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" You see they're trying to trap him. And it says that they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin," or as it says in the King James Version, "Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more." And I of course, love how he handled it. It was a divine solution. It wasn't what you thought he would do. He was well within the rights of the law to condemn her. One of my favorite parts of that scripture is just go and sin no more. He didn't say, go backwards, make amends, go say you're sorry to everybody that you sinned against, every woman's husband you slept with, go back and fix, go back. He just said, go and sin no more. So keep going forward, just sin no more. And I love that because sometimes we get trapped in the mistakes of the past and we start staying in a loop trying to fix those mistakes. And what Jesus says do, even when it's a real thing, a real sin, a real bad thing, go and sin no more. And I love specifically, I love that particular line, but also just the way he handled it in a way that you wouldn't think of. It was a divine solution. So I'm going to read about that same story, but out of Daughters of Eve. So interesting. So it says, though an authentic story about Jesus, this narrative became detached at some point from its original setting. In Luke, most biblical scholars agree, since it shares much both in style and content with that gospel. The story eventually found its way into the Gospel of John, where it seems to fit remarkably well. For one thing, the previous chapter of John records a number of controversies between Jesus and the Pharisees over issues of law and judgment, which is the theme of this story. At least twice in that chapter, chapter 7, Jesus' enemies have wanted to arrest him, but hold back, succumbing to a strange hesitancy to lay hands on him. Thus the way is prepared for this account of a woman whom no one shrinks from seizing or judging. She has, after all, been caught in the act, in bed with someone else's husband. Or maybe she was someone else's wife. Maybe both of them were married. Whatever the circumstances, it's a clear-cut case of adultery, and she is dragged from bed, probably naked, through the streets and shoved in front of Jesus. The hands that have seized her are those of his enemies, the same scribes and Pharisees who so far have been afraid to grab him and carry him off to prison. Jesus would not fail to realize that this woman is taking the brunt of their anger and indignation because they're reluctant to direct it toward him. Up until now, the conflict between Jesus and the religious establishment has been confined to verbal battles. But with this act of seizing the woman, the violence has become physical. Rabbi, they say, and he would hear the derision in their tone. We caught her in bed with this guy in the very act. You know what the Mosaic law says about this. Only the day before, Jesus had been lecturing them about Moses and the law, saying that none of them kept it. Don't judge by appearances, he'd said. Fine, here was more than just appearances. This woman stood before him now in living color, her sin undeniable. Let him try to wiggle out of this. He'd have to come down 4 square for law and order now, or lose his credibility with the people. We ought to stone her, right? That's what the law says, they insist. Actually, however, the law in Deuteronomy states that stoning is a punishment for women who are unfaithful to men they are betrothed to. Also, in the case of adultery, both participants are to be executed, and the method is not prescribed. Thus, Jesus could in fact have debated these finer points of the law with them. However, Jesus knows it's not adultery they're worried about. They're simply seeking a pretext to discredit him with the people. You go along with the law, don't you? They continue to prod. The very question implies, of course, that they suspect, even hope, that he won't. He sits there silently for a moment. They've encircled him like predators holding their quarry at bay, moving in for the kill. Then Jesus does something he does nowhere else in the Bible. He bends over and writes with his finger on the ground. No doubt they expected him to leap to his feet in order to counter their own threatening stance, to wave his arms in a gesture of opposition and defiance. Instead, he stoops even lower. This unlooked-for reaction, along with his preoccupied doodling, takes them entirely off guard. Hey, didn't you hear? What is he doing anyway? Once they're in a state of true perplexity, rather than merely feigning uncertainty over his opinion, Jesus rises. The initial explosiveness of the situation has by now been diffused, and his answer can be felt as authority rather than as bickering. I love that too. The power of silence, not going back and forth, not doing the banter, because then you lose your footing. You lose the power of the word. You lose the power of your argument. He didn't even try to argue. He just stayed silent until they're finally just looking at him, trying to figure out what's going on. And then when he rises in power, and he speaks with authority. All right, he says, startling them. Then he says, if you're certain of your own innocence, then go ahead. And bending down once more, he begins to write again. Who knows what he was writing? All speculations remain just that, guesses. Perhaps it was another passage from Deuteronomy, one they've obviously forgotten. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. Or the stipulation, also from Deuteronomy, that requires the first hand raised to execute a condemned person be that of the accuser. Who wouldn't hesitate at that moment? After all, these are not barbarians Jesus is talking to, not thugs or hooligans who in fact get a kick out of violence for its own sake. They are respectable people, the educated elite. They believe in capital punishment for adultery on principle, but not if theirs is the hand that has to do the dirty work. What makes them hesitate now to pick up those stones to hurl at the woman but their very education, their knowledge of the law that they are trying to use against Jesus? Knowing that they have not in fact followed the letter of the law, which requires them to bring the male offender also, each of them also knowing some secret infraction he has committed against the law, no one can bring himself to bend over and pick up the first rock. Jesus, this is powerful. Jesus did not look up from his writing, does not challenge them with even a glance. Because you know us. I want to do it like, give them the lips. Like, you gonna do it? You gonna do it? I'd want to do it with my facial expressions. Not say a word, but just, He didn't even do that. I love that. I'm just gonna let them figure it out up there. I'm gonna stay right here. Finally, the eldest man, who remembers most, turns and leaves. He is followed by another and another, until at last all the accusers have disappeared. During this scene, attention has been diverted from the woman herself. Jesus waits till all the men are gone before he looks up again. The woman is still standing there before him. The moment for truth has come. Where has everyone gone? He asks her. Have they all dropped their charges? Isn't anyone left to accuse you? And the woman herself finally speaks for the first and only time, not to defend herself, but simply to answer his question. No one, Lord. All right, he says, then I won't be the one to punish you either. Now you're free to go, but don't do it again. Thus he releases her while at the same time asserting his right to judge her. Jesus is the blameless one, the only one whose hand could justifiably be raised against her. He has waited until they were alone to tell her this, however. He is her judge, indeed, her only judge. What is clear from this story is that without Jesus' intervention, this woman would have borne the consequences of this crime both for herself and her equally guilty partner. It's no good looking around for him in the crowd. He's obviously slunk off to hide somewhere. No knight in shining armor. He hasn't tried to protect her from the mob that stormed in and dragged her out of the house, nor has he followed to make any protest on her behalf. Pitiful in his cowardice, he has been entirely willing to let her take the blame for them both. Jesus, on the other hand, has calmed the violence of this storm as effectually as he did the storm on the lake. He has not backed down in the face of the threatening crowd, but has provided the woman protection in a way more miraculous than if he had turned all her accusers to toads, by prompting them to examine their own consciences. Tamar and Jephthah's daughter were innocent victims of violence. This woman, however, is not innocent. Though we may find the punishment for adultery excessive, we have to admit that the cost of adultery, not just in terms of damaged emotions, but measured in actual effects on human lives, is enormous. Like all crimes, it is destructive. Who pays for that devastation and waste? The moral universe, like the physical one, is a delicately balanced equation. That's a powerful sentence. Let me say it again. The moral universe, like the physical one, is a delicately balanced equation. Its deficits have to be made up somehow. The violence that would have been wreaked on this guilty woman will now be directed toward Jesus. By refusing to punish her, he has gathered her guilt to himself. The sin is no less sin for having the sentence commuted. It will still have consequences, but he is the one who will bear them, and in only a few more days, in her place. That's a powerful statement. The sin will be accounted for. There will be consequences, but he's going to take it on himself, as he did for all of us. But, thinking about the moral universe like the physical one is a delicately balanced equation. Its deficits have to be made up somehow. That's such a powerful statement. And thinking about where we are in our world right now and the way that we're trying in our natural state to come up with the solutions. We'll make this illegal, and we'll leave that legal, and we'll just in the natural, like the Pharisees, calling ourselves doing it according to the law. Well, the Constitution says we can bear arms, and we should be killing. We're not supposed to kill, and an unborn child is like we are trying to do the law, letter of the law, and get it wrong in so many ways. Because we're not looking for a divine solution. We're coming up with a man-made solution of what seems logical to us, what we decide seems fair, or in our judgment, in our, we got to put the hammer down. We need to, all of that. His example over and over again showed us it's not how it goes. That's not how you do it. That's not even effective. It's not even effective. And it doesn't mean that sin is not sin. He does tell her in the scripture, go and sin no more. He doesn't say, go and try to be a better person, or he calls a sin a sin. He knows it's sin. He says, go and sin no more. So he's not sugarcoating it, but he's coming up with a solution that is truly divine. And I wish all of us were thinking that way rather than hurling anger and accusations at this party or that person or this group or those believers or whatever it is. We're hurling all of these things. There is no attempt to find a divine solution. We're so confident, so cocksure in our rightness, in our judgment, and what we know, and how wrong they are and how right on both sides. Nobody's looking for that divine solution. And there is one. There is one, because just as, we know, I'm a believer and I'm not a Republican. So they may try to hold on to, the moral right may say Jesus belongs to our party. And then the kind-hearted people who are the liberals in the blue, they say Jesus would care about, the kids being gunned down and the homeless and all of those things. And they can say he would be on our side. And I would say, he's not going to be part of anybody's political party. He has never been. Read the word. He's not going to do it. He wouldn't do it. Finding a divine solution doesn't mean aligning with one side or the other in that way. That's not how it's going to be. Something that you're not even expecting. And the rightness of it, nobody can even argue with. The same way that those people, those educated people of the law, had to just drop those rocks and walk away and realize, I gotta check me first. I can't do this with them. I can't do this with her. And my prayer is that we all seek a divine solution to all the things that we're dealing with right now. Because right now that pendulum just keeps swinging so wildly from side to side. You did that so wrong, so then we get this person in office who tries to fix all those wrongs, and then that pendulum swing. Oh, now we got to put this person in office who's going to take back everything that person did. There is no attempt. There's no attempt to have a divine solution. There's just no attempt of working together and thinking it through of what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Do I think he would be in agreement to the Supreme Court's recent decision? Not necessarily. Do I think he would have been in agreement with Roe versus Wade? Not necessarily. I don't think either one. To be honest with you. And I'll say this. I remember I had a colleague years ago who told me, I would rather have premarital sex than get married and have to get divorced. That, rather have premarital sex knowing I'm operating outside of God's will, rather than get married and the unspoken part is just to have sex to somebody that I don't love and know that I'm going to divorce. And those were her only two options. There was no option in that array of things that said, where can I walk down the line of what God would want? That wasn't it. It was either have premarital sex or get divorced. Those were her two options. Sometimes that's what it feels like right now, as we're battling all of these humongous issues in the world, that it's either this wrong one or that wrong one, and that's it. And I'm saying that's not what his word said. If you read what he says, if you read the way he resolves things, it's always a divine solution. It's never just this evil or that evil, and that's it. It's not that. It's not that. And I just feel like we're not seeking that divine solution. When I keep hearing about all of this civil unrest and international unrest and everybody hurling accusations and name calling and this dog, I'm glad oh my gosh, this is not it. This is not a divine solution. And read how he handled those things. Go back and read John chapter 7, John chapter 8. Read those and see how he handled when people came trying to hurl things, how he resolved those issues. It's never like you would expect. Never like you would expect. And we should all have a heart to seek after the way he would solve things, the solutions he would provide. So that is my message today. I'm going to bring my beautiful sisters on the screen. I will do a gallery shot. And hello, wonderful Latrice. Do you have any comments or thoughts about tonight's Bible study?
Well, as usual, it was wonderful and on point, making me think about how I handle situations. Sometimes, we allow our anger to get the best of us. I know I have several times this week. And so I've decided that I'm going to take a different approach, or try to take a different approach. Take a deep breath. Remember the calmness that Jesus had in that particular story, and just try to reflect that positive, peaceful energy when trying to seek a divine decision. Because when you hurl insults and you're upset, you never really get the outcome that you're looking for. So that was that scripture, and the study was a conviction for me tonight, to handle things in a little more, handle things in a better, not a little more, handle things better when it comes to choosing divine approaches and solutions for the challenges that I face.
I understand. And, there are days, Latrice, that I get it right. And there are days that I get it way wrong, where I feel it literally, when they talk about your blood boiling, it's a literal feeling. And you can feel it welling up. And if you can't get control over that, then before you can control, your mouth is saying stuff, and you are exactly right. It never has the outcome you want it to have. It's never like you spit it out and shut it down. If you're like, that's never how it turns out. And even if somehow those words come out and they're so sharp and so harsh that they shut somebody down, you got to deal with that conviction, because you probably broke their spirit. And I've learned that the hard way as well. That life and death and the power of the tongue, that's real. And being able to just stay calm no matter what. There are times when I know I'm going to have a difficult conversation. I will put, especially if it's by phone or if it's on the computer, I'll put a note up on my computer that says, talk softly and calmly. So because me, I'm animated, I get loud, and I'm blah, 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 and happy loud, but also when I'm not happy. So when that's the case, I'll put a note so it's right in front of me, like, talk very softly.
Someone said to me this evening, a minister that I talk to often, said, either you can let your emotions control you, or you can control your emotions.
Yep.
Let your emotions control you. When you let them have at it, it's never going to be okay.
Nope. It's so true. It's so true. So, Gina, are you with us tonight? Do you have anything you want to share?
I am here. I'm on my phone, so I'm just
Hi, Gina.
getting home. But hi, Latrice. I will say that in lay ministry class, our pastor taught us that Jesus was, some versions of the story say that he was writing down the specific sins of those present. So that
I've heard that too.
Down, they look down. I mean, it's like, oh wait, that was mine. Slowly walk away.
But when I read it out of Daughters of Eve, I wonder if he didn't even look up to give them the hairy eyeball or the lips. I don't know if he was writing down their sins.
I don't think he wrote anybody's name next to it. But certainly you can,
He's just listing them out.
That's what I
slept with somebody, did the thing, stole some stuff.
Exactly. Stole from, his brother, I mean, any, close enough that you could look down and be like, oh, yeah, yep. In case for those people who are so self-righteous and, have their behind entirely up on their shoulders and their righteousness, sometimes you can't see the plank in your eye. And when he said, whoever is without sin, you're just, I mean, what else would he be writing? I mean, doodling just seems random, and I don't think there's anything random about anything that Jesus did. So,
I agree.
to be able to look down and say, huh, oh, okay. I mean, and even if you thought she, and I'm a righteous man, and then you look down and then you see, oh shoot, not only am I not a righteous man, but he knows, he knows, and he hasn't embarrassed me in front of everybody, but there it is. So anyway,
I wouldn't be surprised. I'd love to know what he was writing. He was probably, I mean, I don't know. Like you said, he could be writing those sins. He could have been writing that portion of the law in Deuteronomy, like writing out what it actually said. And it could be anything. I don't know what it was, but I just love how he handled it. That, like he said, they brought him, like the writer said, they brought her to him. And instead of, you can imagine the crowd kind of closing in, got this woman maybe half dressed in front of him. And like she said, he just lowered himself even lower, just went down to the ground.
I love the soft power. I love the use of soft power there. And you have you ever worked with that person who very rarely speaks in the meetings, doesn't say much, but when they do, they speak softly, and they might say one statement at the end. Often it's wise, but it doesn't even have to be that wise. People just hang on it because they know, wait, so-and-so's talking, because
exactly. It's the E.F. Hutton. Everybody leans in.
Everybody leans in because they know how to use that power, the power of silence, as you put it. It is powerful, and you're right. If you respond immediately, then it's a back and forth. But you wait, you keep your voice quiet, and people are like, wait, what did you? Huh?
Yeah, it's powerful. It's just so powerful. So it was a good study, and I'm glad I read it from here too. So again, I'm not, I don't know her, not getting any commission, but Daughters of Eve is a really powerful book, and and the stories, some will hurt your heart when you read it, but the way she describes them, you really just get such a fullness of the story, and then reading it in the scripture just helps open your eyes even more. So
I'm in a group called Sister to Sister on Tuesdays. They do a study from that book. Yeah.
It's powerful, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I'm going to end our YouTube now. I want to say thank you for those who tuned in.